I poured a year of my life and all my savings into making Julian Thorne a philanthropic superstar. As my reward, he publicly fired and humiliated me at the multi-million-dollar gala I built for him, then framed me for incompetence to cover his own crimes. The night it all fell apart began with the shimmer of crystal glasses and the low murmur of powerful people. I stood in the wings of the grand ballroom, the smooth vellum of my cue card slick in my clammy hands. The Planet in Peril Gala was my magnum opus. For an entire year, I had poured my life into it, working 18-hour days, leveraging every contact, charming every donor, and meticulously planning every detail, from the sustainably sourced menu to the recycled glass awards. I did it all for Julian, for his vision, for the mission I believed in with every fiber of my being. Tonight, we were set to announce we had not just met, but exceeded our $10 million goal to reforest a massive tract of the Amazon. My career, my future, it was all tied to this single glittering moment. Julian strode onto the stage to a wave of thunderous applause. Under the spotlights, he was flawless, a movie star playing the role of a savior, his voice a rich baritone that commanded attention. He spoke of his personal dream to heal the planet, of the solitary burden of leadership. He painted a vivid picture of his own sacrifice, his singular vision. My name, the name of the woman who had orchestrated every second of this triumph, was never mentioned. I watched from the shadows as he took credit for the strategy I designed, the donor relationships I cultivated, the entire campaign I had bled for. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was my best friend Maya sitting at table 7. The text read, "He's making you a ghost. Do you see this?" Oh, I saw it. A cold dread, sharp and sudden, began to eclipse the pride I'd felt just moments before. I was an architect watching a king claim he'd built the castle with his own 2 hands. As he reached the crescendo of his speech, he announced the final tally, $12 million. The room exploded. He held up a hand for silence, a beatific smile on his face. "This incredible success proves we are ready for the next phase," he boomed. "And to take Evergreen Earth to the next level, we require a new leadership structure. One that is more streamlined, more agile, more visionary." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room until it landed on me. The smile remained, but his eyes were like chips of ice. "Therefore, it is with a heavy heart that I announce Clara Monroe's role as campaign director will conclude this evening. We thank her for her service and wish her the very best in her future endeavors." The sound in the room vanished, replaced by a deafening roar in my own ears. He had just fired me. Publicly, in a room filled with every major player in the nonprofit world. The humiliation was a physical force, a punch to the gut that stole my breath. I saw the confused, pitying glances. I saw the sudden, intense whispers. My world, so meticulously built, had been leveled by a single, perfectly delivered press release disguised as a speech. I turned and walked, my legs unsteady, my mind a blank slate of shock. I didn't see him leave the stage. I didn't hear the applause that likely, dutifully followed. I ended up in my office, the door closed against the fading sounds of the gala. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving a hollow, aching void. I was numbly packing my personal effects into a cardboard box when there was a soft knock on the door. It was Arthur Vance, a veteran journalist from the Chronicle, a man I had personally invited and spent weeks briefing. I thought for a foolish moment that he had come to offer a word of support. I was wrong. "Clara," he said, his reporter's eyes missing nothing. "Tough break. I'm hearing some troubling rumors about budgetary mismanagement under your direction." Julian mentioned he had to make a change to protect the integrity of the fund. And there it was. The second, more lethal blow. The twist of the knife. This wasn't just a firing, it was an assassination. He wasn't just pushing me out, he was salting the earth so nothing could ever grow for me again. I was being framed as the scapegoat for a problem that didn't even exist. He had taken my success, claimed it as his own, and then used it as the platform from which to destroy my professional reputation. I looked at Arthur, the pity in his eyes now replaced with the glint of a story, and I understood. Julian hadn't just ended my job, he had ended my career. In that moment, sitting amid the debris of my former life, a new cold feeling began to take root in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't despair, it was rage. The 2 months that followed were a slow-motion nightmare. My professional world, once vibrant and full of promise, had become a desolate wasteland. Every job application I sent was met with silence. The few interviews I managed to secure ended abruptly after the reference check phase. The rumors Julian had planted had spread like a virus, poisoning every well. I was the woman who couldn't be trusted with money, the brilliant but unstable director who had to be let go for the good of the cause. I was radioactive. My savings dwindled, and the pressure of the loan I'd taken out for the gala became a physical weight, a constant tightness in my chest. I was on the verge of selling my car when an encrypted email landed in my inbox. The sender was anonymous. The subject line was 5 words that jolted me from my stupor. The truth about Evergreen Earth. My heart began to pound. With trembling hands, I opened it. The message was paranoid and brief, directing me to a secure messaging platform and providing a username. It was a long shot, a potential prank, but I was desperate. I had nothing left to lose. The person on the other end introduced himself as Ben. He was the former chief accountant for Evergreen Earth, and he was terrified. He'd quit a few weeks before the gala, citing personal reasons, but the truth was far darker. It took me a week of careful, patient communication to earn his trust. He was bound by a formidable non-disclosure agreement, one that could ruin him professionally and financially if he broke it. I had to lay my own soul bare, describing the full, humiliating story of my public execution and the subsequent blacklisting. My pain became our common ground. Finally, he decided to trust me. What he revealed was worse than anything I could have imagined. Evergreen Earth was a meticulously crafted fraud. Ben began sending me documents, bank statements, wire transfers, and corporation papers for a dozen shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands. He explained that my record-breaking $12 million gala was just the tip of the iceberg. For years, Julian had been running the same play. Less than 10% of all donations ever went to any environmental cause. The other 90% was funneled through a complex web of accounts, ultimately landing in his personal coffers. The money was used to fund a life of obscene luxury, a penthouse in Manhattan, a fleet of vintage sports cars, a private jet, and lavish trips to Monaco and St. Bart's disguised as donor relations meetings. The reforestation projects were elaborate photo ops. He'd fly to a remote location with a professional film crew, plant a few hundred saplings for the cameras, and then leave, the fledgling trees left to die without any follow-up care. He wasn't saving the world. He was using the world's desire to be saved as his personal ATM. My personal humiliation suddenly felt trivial. This was a grand-scale deception, preying on the hope and generosity of thousands of people. As Ben and I worked in secret, compiling an irrefutable dossier of evidence, my phone rang. It was Julian. I almost didn't answer, but a cold curiosity compelled me. His voice was smooth, concerned, dripping with false sincerity. He said he'd heard I was having a tough time finding a new position. He said he'd been thinking, that he'd been too harsh, and that he wanted to make things right. He offered me a prestigious, high-paying role at a partner organization, one of his own shell companies, I now realized. He also offered a generous severance package to compensate for my troubles. The catch? I would have to sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, which included a clause stating that my departure from Evergreen was amicable and due to creative differences. It was a trap, a brilliantly cynical move to buy my silence and arm himself with a legal document he could use against me if I ever spoke out. I stared at my laptop screen. The 2 paths of my future laid bare before me. One path led to immediate relief, to financial freedom, to an end to the sleepless nights and the hounding creditors. The other led down a dark, uncertain road of fighting a man with immense power and resources, all for the sake of faceless victims I would never meet. The temptation was a physical ache. For a moment, a single shameful moment, I considered it. I called Maya, my voice trembling as I read her Julian's offer. Her response was instantaneous and brutal. "Are you kidding me, Clara?" she yelled, her voice crackling with fury. "Do you hear yourself? He publicly crucifies you, destroys your career, and now he thinks he can buy your silence? He's treating you like just another problem to be solved with money. Don't you dare let him." Her words were a slap in the face, a jolt of ice water that snapped me out of my desperate haze. She was right. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every person whose life had been ruined or whose generosity had been exploited by his predatory scheme. Later that day, I saw an article pop up on my newsfeed. It was a press release for the upcoming Global Environmental Summit in Geneva. The headline read, "Julian Thorne to receive Humanitarian of the Year award." The article was accompanied by a photo of him, beaming, the very picture of ethical, innovative success. That was it, the last straw. The sight of him being celebrated for the very lies that were funding his lavish lifestyle ignited a cold, hard resolve within me. I picked up my phone, my fingers steady now. I replied to Julian's email, "Thank you for the generous offer, Julian. I think we should discuss it in person. Perhaps we could meet in Geneva." Let him think he was winning. Let him walk onto that stage feeling untouchable. He wouldn't see me coming. The conference hall in Geneva was a cathedral of global influence, filled with thousands of delegates, world leaders, and international press. I sat in the vast auditorium, a nobody in a simple gray suit, my anonymity my greatest weapon. On the colossal screens flanking the stage, a professionally produced video tribute to Julian was playing. It was a montage of him hugging children in developing countries, looking thoughtfully at endangered glaciers, and speaking passionately at past events. The voiceover called him the planet's greatest champion, a voice for the voiceless. The hypocrisy was so profound it was nauseating. My phone vibrated. A secure message from Ben. Network security is military grade. I'll have one shot, a window of maybe 3 seconds, right after the tribute video ends and before they switch to the live stage camera. It has to be perfect. My part was to create the opportunity. Using a forged all-access pass I had made, I made my way to the primary AV control booth. Feigning a dizzy spell, I stumbled against a rack of equipment, accidentally unplugging a key power cable to a secondary monitor. As the main technician cursed and bent down to fix it, his attention diverted from the primary control panel for a precious handful of seconds. I sent Ben the signal, "Now." I slipped back to my seat just as Julian was introduced. He walked onto the stage to a standing ovation, soaking in the adoration like a man starved. He accepted the heavy crystal award, holding it up to the light. He began his speech, a masterclass in feigned humility and soaring rhetoric. He spoke of transparency, of the sacred trust between a charity and its donors. He spoke of our shared responsibility to build a better world. He was setting his own trap, and I was about to spring it. He was at the peak of his address, his voice filled with emotion when it happened. For in the end, he proclaimed, it is transparency that forms the bedrock of trust. As the word trust left his lips, the massive screen behind him didn't cut to a close-up of his face. It flickered, then resolved into a stark, professional-looking slide with a title that froze the blood. Evergreen Earth Fund. A forensic financial analysis. Julian faltered, confused for a second, but the presentation had already begun, remotely controlled by Ben. The first slide was a labyrinthine flowchart, tracing the path of the $12 million I had raised, showing it moving from the foundation's account through a series of offshore shell corporations, finally terminating in accounts linked directly to Julian Thorne. The next slide showed a side-by-side comparison. On the left, a glossy promotional photo of a reforestation site in Brazil. On the right, a time-stamped satellite image of the same coordinates, revealing a barren, untouched patch of dirt. The room had fallen utterly silent. The delegates, the journalists, the world leader all sat in stunned disbelief. The television cameras, realizing this was the real story, swiveled from the stage and zoomed in on the damning presentation. The final slide was the kill shot. The screen went black, and a single crystal-clear audio file played through the hall's massive sound system. It was a recording Ben had secretly made of Julian on a phone call. They're not donating to plant trees. Julian's voice chuckled, filled with contemptuous amusement. They're donating to feel good about themselves. I'm just selling them that feeling at the highest possible price. The audio stopped. The screen held on black for a beat, then one final line of text appeared. Full evidentiary dossier has been delivered to the investigative units of the New York Times, The Guardian, and the Internal Revenue Service. I didn't stay to watch the chaos erupt. I stood up, and while every eye in the room was fixed on the imploding man on the stage, I walked out. I could hear the first shocked gasps turning into angry shouts, the frantic scrambling of security. But for the first time in months, the chaos wasn't about me. I was the one who had unleashed it. I stepped out into the crisp, clean Geneva air. I took out my phone, opened my email, and attached the entire dossier Ben and I had compiled. I sent it to Arthur Vance at the Chronicle, the same journalist who had reported on my incompetence. My subject line was simple: an update on your story. A feeling of profound, quiet calm washed over me. It wasn't the thrill of revenge or the joy of victory. It was the simple, clean feeling of the truth finally having its say. The weight was gone. The injustice had been answered. I hadn't just reclaimed my name. I had exposed a predator who had wrapped himself in the cloak of virtue. Standing there, a world away from where I had been broken, I took a deep breath. For the first time in a very long time, I was free.